That evening, I caught myself thinking for the first time. Maybe my bar had died before I was ready to admit it. Neon from the liquor store across the street bled through the fogged windows, staining the floor with a tired red that made everything look sticky. The air carried old beer and the stubborn ghost of cigarettes from people who still thought rules didn't apply to them. A coaster clung to the bottom of my glass rag like a barnacle. When it finally let go, it slapped the counter with an undignified plap. I raised an eyebrow at it. Same, buddy. I kept the place open the way I kept myself upright. On stubbornness, not money. There were nights the cash register wheezed like a retired harmonica. There were nights like this, when even the regulars decided to break up with their vices and go home early. Val. Marco, my bartender, poked his head out from the back, a towel over his shoulder like an apology. You want me to close the kitchen? It's 11, and no one's ordered fries in an hour. Close it, I said. If the fryer starts crying, tell it to get in line. He smirked, then disappeared. Somewhere in the back, a pan sighed as if relieved. I cleaned a glass, which didn't need cleaning, then placed it precisely under. The shelf light so the tiny chips along its rim looked like a constellation. On the far end of the bar, the jukebox hummed with the mood of a machine that knew it had 2 weeks to live. The door opened. It made that bell sound I always meant to fix. Too bright for this place. Like laughter at a funeral. A man in a charcoal suit and a woman with hard shoes crossed the threshold. The woman resembled a legal pad that had learned to walk, stiff, yellowish in the light, efficient. The man had an umbrella even though it hadn't rained all week, and the umbrella had a better posture than I did. Kitchen's closed, I called, already annoyed. Bar's open if you're thirsty for bad decisions. The woman slid a folder onto the counter. Miss Hart. That depends. I set the useless clean glass aside. If this is about my extended car warranty, she died in a tragic transmission accident. Your debt has been transferred, she said, ignoring me with the kind of focus that could slice onions. We're here to notify you of a change in ownership, of the account, and of this property. I blinked. The room tightened, like someone had pulled the corset on the building and forgotten to stop. Excuse me? She didn't look up. Your previous creditor sold your note. The buyer wishes to review terms in person. Review terms. I leaned an elbow on the counter. Is that what we're calling evictions these days? The man set his umbrella down carefully, as if it might bruise. He reached for the folder, fingers long and deliberate, and for the first time I really looked at him. Tall. Not just tall. Proportioned like he'd been sculpted by someone who'd read all the manuals on symmetry. Dark hair, not quite black, parted where the light wanted it. A face that could have sold me a bridge with a signature smile, except he didn't smile. He watched. Predatory, but not hungry. Like the kind of animal that didn't need to chase because the world came to him. Miss Hart, he said, and his voice settled along my spine like cool water. I'm Ronan. Congratulations, I said. Names are hard. Yours is Valerie, he replied. You prefer Val. You bought this bar 4 years ago when it was bleeding out. You like unpretentious whiskeys and making customer loyalty cards no one remembers to use. You hate scented candles, social media updates, and being corrected. Wow, I said. A walking background check. Do you do party tricks, or is creeping on small business owners where you max out? A corner of his mouth moved, almost a smile, quickly gone. I don't creep, he said softly. I acquire. Romantic, I said. So you're the buyer. What gave it away? The folder, the posture, the existential chill that came in with you? He slid a document toward me. My name printed at the top, the numbers below it marching like a dour parade. The total at the bottom blinked up at me with all the compassion of a parking ticket. I knew those numbers. I'd tried bargaining with them in my head at 3 a.m. They never bargained back. The previous holder of your debt has been unreliable, he said. I purchased the note. I have purchased the building as well. The coaster, traitor that it was, chose that moment to stick to my wrist. I peeled it off slowly, keeping my voice even. So you came to gloat in person? To finalize in person. He met my gaze like it was a challenge. And to be clear, your terms as they currently stand are untenable. Your debt is due. Well, I said. So am I. Due for a miracle. Or at least a drink. Val. Marco called from the back, oblivious. You want me to toss the old limes? Please, I said, eyes not leaving Ronan's. While you're at it, toss my hope and 2 of my better illusions. The legal pad woman slid another paper onto the bar, tapping a red tab. Options. Options, I repeated. Because sometimes you have to say a word out loud to make it less likely to strangle you. Ronan gestured, minimal, like he was moving a chess piece only he could see. You can vacate the premises by the end of the week, surrendering equipment as collateral, or... I lifted a brow into the kind of arch that had cut lesser men. You can continue to operate, he said, under new management. I barked a laugh I couldn't afford. New management meaning... You... Me, he said. I don't work for strangers, I said. I barely work for myself. You work for the bar, he said. And just like that, he looked past my sarcasm and pinned the soft place behind it. That's why you haven't shut the door. The debt is a symptom. Your attachment is the disease. I'll add your bedside manner to my Yelp review, I said. But no one tells me how to run my place. On the contrary, he said, and the slightest shadow ringed his irises, a trick of the light that wasn't a trick at all. The air thinned, and for a heartbeat the neon faltered. I just did. Marco chose that moment to reappear with a crate of bottles. He paused, reading the air the way bartenders do. Humidity of conflict, barometric pressure of imminent disaster. Everything okay? Fine, I said, still staring at the man who said he acquired. We're discussing management styles. Ronan didn't glance away. Miss Hart, I don't intend to be your enemy. You purchased the right to be, I said. That's practically the same thing. A beat. He inclined his head, conceding the point like a gentleman who enjoyed fencing lessons. Then let me be plain. He placed his hand on the folder. The room went quieter. If papers could flinch, these would have. The legal pad woman took an almost imperceptible step back. Your debts belong to me now, he said, voice even, precision like a blade kept out of sight. And with them, this place. The words landed, heavy and tidy. Not a threat. A fact. Anger rose up hot, quick, familiar as whiskey burn. But under it, something colder, something with teeth, the feeling that the universe had finally shifted from passive-aggressive to just aggressive-aggressive. My heartbeat wrote its name along my ribs. I looked at him and saw what he was, someone who didn't blink at other people's ruins. Someone who could balance a ledger with a pulse on it. I hated him for it. The kind of hate that comes pre-packaged with fascination. So, I said, smoothing the corner of the paper I wasn't going to sign tonight. What now? You throw me out and collect your building like a new set of cufflinks? You're not a cufflink, he said. You're leverage, and potential. Did you just flirt with me using accounting metaphors? I asked. Because if so, I need you to know I'm extremely vulnerable to spreadsheets. Another near smile, gone again. We'll review operations tomorrow, he said, gathering the papers with a neatness that made me want to scatter them. 9 a.m. Don't be late. He turned, and for the second time the neon stuttered. The bell over the door chimed bright and inappropriate as he left. The legal pad ghost followed, heels ticking judgment across my floor. Marco exhaled. Boss? I stared at the empty doorway, the space Ronan left behind feeling somehow occupied. The air tasted metallic, like a coin on the tongue. Lock up, I said. And remind me to add, hire an exorcist to the to-do list. When the deadbolt slid home, I leaned on the bar, palms flat, head bowed. As if the wood could whisper something other than you did your best. My reflection in the dull varnish looked like a woman who'd lost a bet with fate and still wanted a rematch. Better to fight, I thought, heat returning to my chest like a dare. Better to fight than to fold. Better to fight a demon than surrender without a brawl. The office in the back of the bar always smelled like old whiskey and broken promises. A crooked ceiling fan ticked slow circles above, its chain clinking like a drunk metronome. Papers littered the desk in stacks I never had the courage to organize. They looked at me the way creditors did. Disappointed, expectant, already calculating the obituary. Ronan stood at the center of it all, motionless. He had no business looking so clean in a room that collected dust the way I collected bad decisions. The contrast between us was insulting. He set the folder down on my desk with the kind of precision that made me want to knock it to the floor just to hear the papers scatter. Sit, he said. I leaned against the doorframe instead. Funny, I thought this was my office. Not anymore, he replied. Your office, your bar, your debt. They're mine. God, you're charming. I crossed my arms. Is that how you always introduce yourself? Hi, I'm Ronan, destroyer of small businesses. He opened the folder without bothering to answer. My name stared up at me in black ink, tethered to numbers that had been haunting me for months. He ran a finger down the page, and I noticed something strange. The paper darkened where he touched, a thin gray shadow that trailed after him before fading back to white. Like the ink wanted to obey him. Like the paper remembered him. I blinked. What was that? What was what? His eyes were flat, almost bored. He tapped the page again, and the mark appeared, then dissolved. He didn't explain. He didn't need to. Some part of me already knew he wasn't normal. He turned the page. Your options are simple. 1, you leave, tonight, if you want. You surrender the bar, the equipment, the name. You walk away with nothing but what you can carry. Romantic? I said. What's behind door number 2? You stay. Under new management. New management, meaning you. Me, he confirmed. I laughed, because if I didn't, I'd start throwing bottles. So what? You're my boss now? If you like that word. I tilted my head, let my tone go sharp. And what if I call it slavery? What if I say I'm your slave? His gaze snapped up, pinning me in place. The word on his tongue sounded heavier than mine, like it had weight in languages I didn't know. Call it what you want. Even slaves make choices. The silence after that felt like a third person in the room. The fan chain clicked, clicked, clicked. I realized my palms were sweating, though my mouth refused to admit defeat. Choices, I said finally. So my choices are lose everything, or become your underpaid assistant. You're really out here selling empowerment. He didn't smile. You'll keep the bar, you'll keep the name, you'll even keep your autonomy, up to a point. But you'll answer to me. You'll do things my way, no excuses, no half measures. That's the only reason this place will survive. I hated how calm he sounded. I hated that part of me believed him. You think you know everything about me, I said. You think you can just waltz in here with your paperwork and your, whatever, trick you just did with the paper. He closed the folder sharply. I don't need to think. I know. The shadows in the room seemed to lean toward him for a second. The overhead light flickered. My heart tripped over itself. He looked too solid, too deliberate, like reality bent to make space for him. I swallowed and forced my voice steady. Fine. But let's be clear. I pushed off the doorframe and stepped closer, close enough to smell the faint, dark cologne that clung to him like smoke. I'm not afraid of you. I don't care what kind of tricks you pull. This bar is mine, and I'll fight for it. Something unreadable flickered across his face. Respect? Amusement? Hunger? He leaned back slightly, giving me room, but his words were still sharp. Then fight, he said. But do it under my banner. Or walk away. For a heartbeat, I saw the future I didn't want, closing the door for. Good. Watching the neon go dark, admitting that I'd fought for nothing. Pride was one thing. Losing everything was another. My chest tightened, the way it does when you realize you're cornered and the only way out is forward. I exhaled through my nose, half a laugh, half a growl. You really don't give a girl much to work with. I give you survival, he said simply. The rest is your problem. I hated him. I hated the calm, the certainty, the way he stripped me bare with sentences so clean they hurt. But I wasn't going to leave my bar to rot in someone else's hands. I grinned, mean, toothy, the grin of someone who had nothing left to lose but wasn't ready to admit it. Fine, I'll stay. I'll work with you. But don't think for a second this makes me obedient. His expression didn't change, but the air in the room did. Lighter, somehow, as if he'd already won. I jabbed a finger at him. I'd rather die than run, and for the first time, Ronan's mouth curved, not quite a smile, but close. We'll see, he said. Tomorrow, 9 a.m. Don't be late. Friday nights used to mean life. Music too loud, glasses clinking, the low buzz of people trying to forget their lives and mine. Lately, it meant a thin crowd of regulars, jukebox tracks that skipped, and me pretending I didn't notice the cash register sounded lighter every week. The bar hummed anyway. Old rock spilled from the speakers, mingling with the sour smell of beer. Marco, the only bartender I still trusted, or so I thought, moved behind, the counter with his easy grin, pouring drinks like liquid apologies. He was good with customers, better than me sometimes. He knew their names, their poison, their bad jokes. Maybe that's why I let things slide. Maybe that's why I didn't want to believe. I was halfway through serving a whiskey neat when Ronan appeared beside the register, silent as a shadow. He didn't belong here. Too sharp in his dark suit, too still in a room full of noise. People parted around him without realizing why, like water refusing to touch oil. I tried to ignore him. If I pretended long enough, maybe he'd dissolve back into whatever dimension accountants of the underworld came from. But his gaze was fixed on the cash drawer Marco had just closed. "Interesting," he murmured, almost to himself. I stiffened. "Don't start. Would you like to know," he said softly, "how much money your bartender has taken from you this week?" My throat tightened. "Excuse me?" Ronan didn't raise his voice, but I felt the weight of it anyway. $60 on Monday, $35 on Wednesday. Tonight he skimmed 2 20s from the last round of tips. My hand tightened on the glass I was drying. "You're lying." "Am I?" He watched Marco with the focus of a predator tracing a path. "He keeps the extra folded bills under the mat in the back room, right corner. If you doubt me, check." I wanted to laugh, to call him insane, to brush it off. But the worst part, was the sudden hollow in my gut. Because I'd noticed things. A drawer that didn't balance. Receipts that looked off. And I'd chosen not to look closer. Because if Marco betrayed me too, I didn't know what I'd have left. I slammed the glass down harder than I meant to. "Marco," I called, too sharp. He glanced over, smile faltering. "Back room. Now." He hesitated, then disappeared behind the door. I followed, Ronan trailing without a sound. In the cramped space, the hum of the refrigerator was the only witness as I yanked up the rubber mat. My stomach dropped. Crumpled bills. Exactly where Ronan said. "Val." Marco's voice cracked. "I was gonna put it back. I swear, things are tight. You stole from me," I said flatly, words like stones. My chest burned, but my face stayed cold. "Get out. Val, please, out." He left with his head down, the door slamming behind him. I stood in the silence that followed, hands shaking, the taste of metal in my mouth. I wanted to scream, to cry, to break something. Instead I turned, and Ronan was still there, calm as if he'd expected every second. I hated that he was right. I hated that he saw what I wouldn't let myself see. Heat rose behind my eyes, and I forced it down with anger. "You enjoy this, don't you? Proving me wrong." "No." His tone was cool but not unkind. "I enjoy being right." Same difference. For a moment, we just looked at each other, his presence pressed against me like gravity. Quiet and immovable. Finally, I broke the silence. "You see everything," I said, voice low. "Everything I try not to notice. I see what people do when they believe no one's watching," he replied. "That's my work. My nature." The words cut deeper than I wanted to admit. I swallowed, leaning against the desk, trying to cover my weakness with sarcasm. "Congratulations, then. You're officially the creepiest security camera I've ever had." Something flickered at the corner of his mouth. Not a smile exactly, but an acknowledgement. Better a camera than a blindfold. And damn him, a part of me respected that. I loathed myself for it, but the respect was there, coiled in my chest with the resentment. I hated him for tearing away my illusions. I hated myself for needing it. The jukebox out front switched songs, muffled through the wall, something low and bluesy. I pressed a hand to my temple, exhaustion seeping into my bones. "Get out of my office," I muttered. "I need a minute." He didn't argue. Just straightened his cuffs and moved toward the door, silent as ever. But before he left, his gaze met mine one last time, steady and merciless. "You wanted loyalty," he said. "What you need is clarity." The door clicked shut behind him. I sagged against the desk, breathing shallow, staring at the hidden cash still spread across the floor. Clarity hurt worse than betrayal. And the worst part was knowing he was right. Again, the night air outside the bar was damp, heavy with the kind of city heat that clung even after sunset. Neon flickered on the opposite block, sputtering like it couldn't decide if it wanted to live. I stepped out with the trash bag slung over my shoulder, ready to curse at the overflowing dumpster, when a voice froze me. "Val." I turned, and my stomach did a mean little twist. Ethan. Of course it was him, Immaculate suit. Cologne sharp enough to sting, the same boyish smile that had once convinced me he knew what he was doing. Now it just looked like a mask too polished to be human. I dropped the trash into the bin harder than necessary. Wow, didn't expect to see you slumming it down here. Lost your yacht? He laughed, soft, like he wanted to smooth the tension with charm. Still sharp. I missed that. He took a step closer, hands out as though he was bringing peace. Listen, Val, I've been thinking. About us. About the bar. We were good together, before the investors, before the mistakes. We could be good again. I wanted to laugh, but the sound caught on the old wound in my chest. This is the man who sold me out, who made me pitch to his investors like a fool, and then left me to take the fall when the numbers didn't add up. The memory burned hot with humiliation. You missed me? I said flatly. You mean you missed having someone to blame when things go south? His smile wavered, then steadied. That's not fair. I was under pressure, Val. You know how these deals work. Sometimes you have to make sacrifices. But we don't have to dwell on the past. I can help you now. Get you out of this mess. You just need to let me in again. The audacity nearly knocked me over. He was dressed like success and spoke like forgiveness cost nothing. As if my betrayal was just a line item in his spreadsheet of regrets. Before I could summon the right insult, the door behind me opened. I felt the shift in the air before I even turned. Ronan. He stepped out into the glow of the flickering streetlight, dark suit. Immaculate, his stillness sharper than Ethan's entire performance. He didn't say anything at first, just observed, eyes glinting like steel catching firelight. And suddenly, Ethan's polished confidence looked cheap, a trick rehearsed too many times. Ethan cleared his throat, recovering. And you are... Not yours, Ronan said calmly. Something in Ethan's jaw tightened. Val, you didn't tell me you'd found... new help? She didn't, Ronan answered before I could. You didn't ask. You never do. The words slid between us, precise and merciless. Ethan frowned, bristled, then turned back to me. Val, don't let him... You don't want her back, Ronan interrupted, voice cold enough to still the air. You want control. Control over the woman who once loved you, so you can pretend you're still worth something. It landed like a blade. Ethan's mouth snapped shut, his face flushing with a mix of rage and shame. He stared at Ronan as though he'd been stripped naked in the middle of the street. I almost pitied him. Almost. You don't know what you're talking about, Ethan snapped finally, voice too high, too brittle. He turned on his heel, the shine of his shoes ridiculous against the cracked pavement. This isn't over, Val. I watched him retreat into the dark, shoulders stiff, mask broken. The silence he left behind felt heavier than his words. When I looked at Ronan, he hadn't moved. He just stood there, eyes steady on mine, as if waiting to see what I'd do with the space Ethan had vacated. I opened my mouth, closed it, then forced out a shaky laugh. Well, that was fun. Nothing like a walk down memory lane to remind you why you don't date men with cufflinks. But inside, something twisted. Gratitude. Sharp and unwanted. Because for the first time in a long while, someone had stood between me and the ghosts that wanted to drag me back. I hated that it was him. And worse, I hated that I didn't hate it enough. My apartment was a shoebox with cracked walls and a stubborn radiator that hissed like it hated me. Normally, I didn't mind. It was mine. Tonight, it felt like a cage. I paced the narrow living room, half lit by the sickly glow of the street lamp outside. The words still rang in my ears, sharper than any knife. And you were my brother. I had shouted until my throat burned. And James, my James, the friend who'd been there when the bar opened, who poured shots beside me on the good nights and helped mop floors on the bad ones. He hadn't even flinched. I wanted to save myself, he'd said, voice breaking but firm. It was you or me, Val. I chose me. Then the door slammed, and the echo left me alone with nothing but silence and the weight of betrayal pressing on my chest. I dropped onto the sagging couch, burying my face in my hands. My skin was damp, tears or sweat, I couldn't tell anymore. My chest felt hollow, scraped clean. I wanted to scream, but the sound stuck, thick in my throat. I trusted him. I trusted him after Ethan, after the investors, after every damn person who left. And he sold me out anyway. The knock never came. There was no sound of a door opening. But when I lifted my head, Ronan was there, leaning against the far wall like he'd always belonged in the shadows. His presence didn't startle me anymore. Maybe part of me expected him when things went dark. "You should leave," I said hoarsely. "I don't have energy for another lecture." He studied me for a moment, eyes unreadable, then spoke with that unnerving calm. "You're not angry at him." A bitter laugh scraped out of me. "Oh, trust me, I'm angry. I could set the whole block on fire with what I'm feeling right now." "No." He stepped closer, the dim light catching the edges of his face. "You're angry at yourself. For still believing loyalty is real. For still expecting honesty from people who value survival more than you." The words hit harder than James's betrayal. My breath stuttered, and for once, I couldn't summon the sarcasm, couldn't hide behind barbed humor. He was right. God help me, he was right. I stared at the floor, fists trembling on my knees. The silence stretched, thick as smoke. Normally I'd fight back, spit venom just to feel in control. But this time, there was nothing left. When I finally looked up, Ronan hadn't moved. His gaze was steady, merciless but not cruel, like he wasn't condemning me, just telling me the truth I'd refused to admit. My voice cracked. "So what? I'm just supposed to stop believing in people altogether. That's your big revelation?" "No," he said simply. "You're supposed to stop lying to yourself about what people are. They'll always choose themselves. Your mistake is expecting anything else." The radiator hissed, and outside a siren wailed somewhere distant. Inside I sat frozen, caught between wanting to scream at him and wanting to collapse under the relief of someone saying it out loud. I didn't argue. For the first time since I met him, I didn't argue, and that scared me more than the betrayal. The bar was unrecognizable. Or maybe I was. Stacks of unopened boxes lined the floor, their cardboard faces screaming with names of new suppliers I didn't recognize. The air smelled of fresh varnish and disinfectant, instead of stale hops and regret. Even the neon over the bar hummed steadier, like it had been bribed into professionalism. "This isn't a bar," I muttered, watching two delivery guys wheel in another crate of liquor. "It's a corporate takeover disguised as happy hour." Ronan stood in the center of it all, coat off, shirt sleeves rolled up just enough to make him look infuriatingly at ease. He was reviewing invoices with a focus so sharp it made me itch. "It's survival," he corrected. "You had vendors bleeding you dry. I cut them off and brought in new ones. Better prices, better product." I crossed my arms. "Better taste in whiskey too, I suppose. Because heaven forbid anyone drink what they actually like." He glanced up, calm as ever. "What people like doesn't matter. What they keep coming back for does." I rolled my eyes. "You make it sound like addiction." "Exactly." He didn't even blink. I wanted to argue, but damn it, he wasn't wrong. Still, being right didn't make him less unbearable. By the time the crew left, the place looked sharper, cleaner. The only mess left was me. I reached for my apron, my old one, frayed strings, and a ketchup stain shaped like Australia. Before I could tie it, Ronan stopped me with a single look. "No." "What do you mean, no?" He pulled something from a neatly folded pile and held it out. A black apron, stiff and brand new. Embroidered logo, crisp edges. Corporate perfection. I recoiled like he'd offered me poison. "Absolutely not. I'm not wearing that. I'll look like a mall barista who failed upward. It's standard. It's insulting. It's functional. Functional for robots, maybe." I clutched my stained apron to my chest like armor. "This is me. This tells a story. It tells the story of someone who doesn't care," he said evenly. "And you care. More than you admit." That one stung, which meant I couldn't let him see it. "Fine," I snapped, "but I'm not wearing your uniform." Ronan's expression didn't change. He simply reached behind him, pulled out another apron and held it up. This one was the same cut, but a deep, wicked shade of red. Rich, bold, the kind of color that dared you to look away. "I chose this one for you," he said. "It matches your sarcasm." I blinked, then barked out a laugh I hadn't planned. "Are you serious?" Deadly. Against my better judgment, I took it. The fabric was smooth, heavier than it looked. For a second I pictured myself in it, sharp edges and sharp tongue, and hated that it felt right. "Don't get cocky," I said, tying it around my waist. "This doesn't mean I approve. It just means I'm too tired to argue." "Of course," he said, the faintest curve at his lips. Call it whatever you need. The rest of the day passed in a blur of tasks, updating menus, sorting bottles, organizing schedules. Every decision he made, I challenged. Every rule he tried to set, I poked holes in. No, we're not offering 3 versions of gin and tonic. That's ridiculous. People like choice. People like not having to think. Then we'll train them to think. It went like that for hours. And the strangest thing happened. Instead of draining me, it fueled me. The back and forth, the sparring, the way he never flinched when I pushed, it lit something under my ribs. I hadn't felt this alive in months. By the time the sun dipped and the neon outside came on, the bar gleamed. It wasn't mine the way it used to be. But it wasn't dead either. I leaned against the counter, arms aching, apron stained with the day's battles. Ronan stood across from me, surveying the room with a calm satisfaction that made my teeth itch. You win this round, I admitted grudgingly. He raised an eyebrow. Round? This isn't over. His gaze held mine, steady, unreadable, but sharp as ever. I wouldn't want it to be. And that was when it hit me. The fight itself was keeping me upright. The bar wasn't the only thing he'd resurrected. I hated that. I loved that. And I wasn't about to admit either. The bar was quiet, the kind of quiet that doesn't feel like peace. The jukebox had gone dark hours ago, chairs stacked, counters wiped down until the wood gleamed under dim light. Only the hum of the old fridge kept me company. I was behind the counter, trying to lose myself in busy work, polishing glasses that were already clean, when the front door creaked open. I froze. No bell, just the heavy drag of hinges and the scrape of expensive shoes against the floor. Valerie Hart. The voice was smooth, but laced with something sharp. I looked up. A man in a tailored suit strolled in, the kind of smug grin that belonged to someone who always left with more than he brought. Vaughn Whitaker, my competitor, the vulture who'd circled my debt long before Ronan swooped in. You're closed, I said, setting the glass down with deliberate force. He ignored me, sauntering closer. Funny thing, closing hours. Sometimes rules don't apply when you own the game. Get to the point, Vaughn, or trip on your ego on the way out. His smile widened. The point is, you're in my way. You should have folded when I had the chance to buy this place outright. But now, his gaze swept the room like he was already picturing his name on the door. Now you've invited something dangerous in. And I don't mean me. Before I could fire back, another voice cut through the air, low and steady. She doesn't fold. Ronan. He stepped from the shadows near the back, silent until he wasn't, and the entire bar seemed to shift around him. His presence filled the room like smoke, inevitable and suffocating. Vaughn chuckled, though the sound was thinner than he meant it to be. Ah, the new owner. I've heard whispers, a man with deep pockets and darker tricks, but at the end of the day, you bleed like anyone else. You assume, Ronan said evenly. I play by the same rules as you. The temperature dropped. I felt it, cold, slipping into my skin, a draft with no source. The light above the bar flickered once, then steadied, weaker. Vaughn smirked, but his eyes darted. Threats won't scare me, I know your kind. Men who posture, who think they can muscle me out. He stopped. Because Ronan wasn't just standing anymore. His shadow stretched wrong across the floor, elongated, rippling like ink spilled too wide. His eyes caught the dim light and burned faintly, an unnatural gleam, like coals that never cooled. When he spoke again, his voice carried weight, deeper than sound, vibrating through the bones of the bar itself. I don't threaten. His words crawled across the air. I end. Vaughn stumbled back, his smirk cracking. What the hell? You came here to frighten her. Ronan's shadow coiled along the walls, curling toward Vaughn like smoke that wanted flesh. To pretend you could own what isn't yours. You will leave and you will not return. Or the debt you owe yourself will be the last you ever collect. Vaughn's face went pale. He muttered something incoherent, turned and bolted for the door. It slammed shut behind him with a finality that rattled the glasses on the shelves. Silence fell. I realized my hands were trembling against the bar. My breath came fast, sharp, like I'd run a mile without moving an inch. Slowly, I lifted my gaze to Ronan. What the hell are you? My voice cracked but didn't break. No, better question. Who the hell are you? For a long moment he just looked at me. The shadows eased, retreating like a tide, and the bar exhaled with me. His eyes dimmed back to the impossible blue I'd grown used to, though they still glowed faintly, like secrets refusing to die. "The one who keeps your world in balance," he said at last. His tone wasn't boastful. It was matter of fact, terrifying in its simplicity. "And you're one of the few who hasn't surrendered yet." The words landed heavy. A strange mix of fear and warmth spread through my chest, like fire lit under ice. He saw me. Not just the failures. Not just the debts. Me. I swallowed, my throat tight. "You're insane," I whispered. But it didn't sound convincing, even to me. Ronan tilted his head, studying me as though the verdict mattered. Then, quieter. "Or perhaps I'm the only one who's telling you the truth." I should have hated him for that. I should have screamed, told him to get out. But instead, all I could do was hold his gaze, my pulse tripping over itself, and admit silently what my mouth refused to. He wasn't just my captor. He was my ally. And that terrified me more than any demon ever could. The conference room smelled of money and arrogance. Long polished table, high-backed chairs, glass walls that reflected my nerves like a cruel mirror. I'd never belonged here. Bars were my battlefield. Sticky floors, neon lights, the music of clinking glasses. This place belonged to them, and they knew it. Ethan, my ex, sat to the left, cufflinks gleaming as if they were more important than his pulse. Vaughn, the vulture competitor, leaned back in his chair like he already owned the place. And at the end of the table, James, my friend, my brother, the man who sold me out, couldn't even look me in the eye. 3 ghosts of my past, smiling like they'd buried me already. I wanted to scream. I wanted to bolt. Instead, I sat frozen, hands clenched in my lap, trying not to choke on the humiliation pressing against my ribs. The investors buzzed around us like flies. "Ms. Hart," one of them said, "we've reviewed your books. It's over. The numbers are unsalvageable." My chest hollowed. They were right. The numbers had been my executioner for months. Ethan leaned forward, voice honey smooth. "Let her walk away with dignity. She's done her best. We'll take it from here." I swallowed, throat tight. My best. My best hadn't been enough. "Val," James finally spoke, soft, almost pleading. "Don't drag this out. You've lost. Let go." The words sliced me open. I heard my own voice, brittle. "It's over. It's all over." The scrape of a chair cut the air. "Ronan." He rose from his seat beside me, towering, fury radiating off him in quiet waves. His gaze swept the room, and suddenly the polished investors looked like children about to be scolded. "You fight for this bar every day," he said, voice sharp enough to crack glass. "You bleed for it. You breathe for it. And now, in the moment it matters most, you surrender first?" His eyes locked onto mine, unflinching. "You have more strength than all of them combined. Prove it." The room hushed. My heart hammered. He believed I had strength. Me, after everything. After debts, betrayals, nights I could barely crawl out of bed. My strength? I didn't feel it. But I wanted to. God, I wanted to. I pushed my chair back and stood. My knees shook, but my voice didn't. "You think you can scare me out of my own place?" I said, scanning the table, letting my glare land on Ethan, then Vaughn, then James. "You've already taken everything you could, my trust, my money, my time, but you don't get this bar. Not because of numbers, not because of your tricks. You don't get it because it's mine. And I'm not giving it up." Ethan's jaw tightened. Vaughn smirked, but uneasily. James looked away. I stepped closer, leaning on the table. "You want the truth? You don't want this place because it's valuable. You want it because I refused to break when you thought I would. Because I'm still standing. That terrifies you more than any balance sheet." Murmurs rippled through the investors. Someone shuffled papers. Someone else coughed nervously. Ronan's gaze never left me. For once, he didn't speak. He didn't need to. Ethan stood, trying to regain control. "She's unstable. Emotional. She can't possibly—" "Instability," Ronan cut in, his voice like thunder in the too-bright room, "is mistaking cruelty for business. Which is exactly what you've done." Vaughn shifted in his seat, color draining. James muttered something under his breath, too low to catch. The investors looked unsettled, glancing at one another, doubt flickering in their eyes. I pressed the moment. "You don't have to believe in me," I told them, voice firm. But look at them. Do they look like men you'd trust with your money, with your future? Because I sure as hell don't. Silence. Then, slowly, heads nodded. Papers were pushed aside. One by one, the investors turned from Ethan, Vaughn, and James, back to me. The tide had shifted. Ethan's face burned red with fury. Vaughn slammed a hand against the table, but no one cared. James slumped, defeated. And just like that, their plan cracked apart, splintering into pieces that couldn't be glued back together. I stood straighter, breath shaking but steady enough. For the first time in too long, I didn't feel like I was drowning. Ronan placed a hand lightly on the back of my chair, his presence steady, grounding. His voice was low, meant for me alone. See? He murmured. You were never powerless. You just had to remember. I didn't look at him. Couldn't. If I did, I might forget how to stand. But I felt the truth of his words settle into my chest, heavy and warm. I'd thought this was the end. But maybe, just maybe, it was the beginning. The bar was quiet again, but not the same quiet as before. This wasn't the silence of defeat. It was the kind that comes after a storm, when the air still tastes of lightning. I sat at the counter, staring at the register that for once didn't feel like a coffin. The investors were gone, the vultures too. The place was still mine. My chest ached from the effort it had taken to fight for it, but the ache felt good, like sore muscles after a long run. Ronan was behind the bar, flipping through a folder. The lamplight caught the sharp lines of his face. But there was something different in him tonight. Not softer exactly. Demons don't soften. But less distant. You should know, he said without looking up. Your debt is settled. I blinked. What? He closed the folder with a decisive snap. Paid in full, effective immediately. I laughed, the sound brittle. So that's it? You swoop in, play savior, and now you're gone? I didn't say I was leaving. That made me turn. He was watching me now, eyes steady, voice even. I close your debt, but I don't close the book. My stomach twisted. Then what do you want, Ronan? Because I can't give you more than I already have. He stepped closer, sliding the folder onto the counter between us. His hand lingered on it, fingers brushing the edge. For a moment, the paper darkened beneath his touch, shadows fading in and out, a reminder of what he was. I want a new contract, he said. Not as your creditor, as your partner. The words sank in, heavy as a stone. I stared at him, searching for the trick, the hidden clause. A partner. In what, exactly? Business, or something else? His lips curved, not quite a smile but close enough to sting. Both are inevitable, aren't they? Something broke loose in my chest then. Half a sob, half a laugh. I pressed the heel of my hand to my eyes, but tears slipped anyway, hot and unwelcome. You're worse than every creditor I've ever met. At least they just wanted money. And me? His voice was low, steady. I looked at him through blurred vision. My throat was raw, but I forced the words out. You might be the only one I don't want to lose. The admission cracked something open between us. He didn't move closer, didn't touch me. But the weight of him filled. The space anyway. Solid, unshakable, terrifying in its certainty. For the first time, I didn't feel owned. I felt chosen. I wiped my face with the back of my hand and huffed a laugh. Fine. We'll try it your way. Partners? Ronan inclined his head, as if the deal were already sealed. But his gaze lingered, sharp and unreadable, like he was memorizing the moment. And maybe, just maybe, I was too. The bar breathed again. It wasn't the same place I had fought for months ago. The cracked floorboards had been replaced. The neon hummed with confidence instead of desperation. And the smell of disinfectant had given way to roasted coffee beans and fresh citrus from the cocktails we actually had time to make. The lights were warm, the booths filled, and for the first time in years, the hum of conversation felt like music instead of background noise. I stood behind the counter, shaking a cocktail shaker that probably didn't need shaking anymore, but it gave my hands something to do. My eyes kept wandering to the crowd, couples laughing, old regulars returning, new faces who already looked like they belonged. It was alive. My bar was alive. Your pour is uneven, Ronan said smoothly, appearing beside me as if he'd stepped out of the shadows of the wine rack. He leaned against the counter, crisp shirt sleeves rolled up, perfectly out of place and perfectly in control all at once. I didn't look at him. My pour is genius. Customers love it. Customers are forgiving. I'm not. I slammed the shaker onto the counter with a smirk. You're a demon, not a bartender. Leave the alcohol to me. The corner of his mouth twitched, the closest thing he ever gave me to an open smile. If I left it to you, they'd all be drunk within half an hour. Which is good for business. Which is bad for survival. We stared at each other for a beat too long. The noise of the bar swirled around us. Laughter, music, the clink of ice against glass. But in that moment it all blurred, leaving only him, steady and immovable. I rolled my eyes to break the spell, grabbing a glass to serve. Fine. You win this round. But when we win best cocktails in the city, I'm taking full credit. Of course, he said, voice tinged with dry amusement. Call it whatever you need. The crowd roared with some inside joke, and for once, I didn't flinch at the sound. I leaned on the counter, catching my breath, letting the warmth of the room seep into my bones. We'd survived. More than survived, we'd built something new. I glanced sideways at Ronan. He was watching the room, but his gaze slid back to me, steady, dark, full of something I couldn't label without risking everything. And for the first time, I didn't look away. It wasn't just partnership anymore, not just survival. It was something we hadn't signed on paper, but both of us knew was binding anyway. Something I wasn't ready to name, but I didn't have to. Not yet. The night went on, the bar alive with voices and light. I poured another drink, and beside me Ronan stayed, just close enough that I could feel the weight of him, the promise of something more. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was fighting alone.